Now that we have talked about the beginning stages of developing a speech, thinking about who your audience is, and also choosing a topic that's relevant to them but that you're knowledgeable on, we now want to begin the speech writing process. So what we're going to do is we're going to cast a vision for our speech. I want you to think about the central message that you would want your audience to know and be able to say to you after they hear your presentation. Just like in real life, setting goals for speeches is just as important. They help us to really achieve what it is that we've set out to achieve. So for someone that wants to achieve weight loss, they're going to set smaller goals like, I want to lose 5 pounds within this first month. And by doing so, research shows that that really helps them to achieve the overall goal. And so that's what you want to do as you begin to write your presentation. You want to set a goal as well. You want to think about, what do I want to truly accomplish with my presentation? There's a quote that was given by Diana Boer. She says, if you can't say your message in a sentence, then you can't say it in an hour. And I absolutely believe that that's true. You need to be able to summarize for yourself what your key idea is. And if you can do that, you're going to be successful. So let's start talking about how then are you going to write your speech. The first thing that you need to do is you need to go ahead and write your speech goals. You're going to have 2 of them. One will be a general speech goal, and the second will be a specific speech goal. Let's start with the general speech goal. Your general speech goal should really relate to the type of presentation that you're giving. So if you're giving an informative speech, your general goal is to inform. If you're giving a persuasive speech, then the general goal is to persuade. And I'd like to see that at the beginning of the speech outline that you will write for me. Then let's get a little more specific. Okay, what is our specific speech goal going to be? Every good teacher thinks about the learning objectives that they want their students to be able to do after they listen to or hear a lesson. You are also going to put on the teacher hat for a moment and think about, what do you want your audience to be able to do once you've stopped speaking. This is what your specific speech goal is going to be. It's going to be a 1-sentence statement about what you want your audience to be able to do or to perform after you've given your presentation. So here's a couple of examples. I might say, I want my audience to be able to explain the 3 benefits of earning a degree in communication. Well, what do I want my audience to be able to do? I want them to tell me those. I want them to explain what those benefits are. And if they can, after I've talked, I've been successful. Here's another example. I want my audience to be able to list 3 potential career paths for communication majors. How do I know that I've been successful? If they could say them back to me, if they could list those potential career paths back to me, then I know that I've been successful. If you think about the verbs that I'm using what we call action verbs. They're ones that we could potentially observe somebody doing. Words that I want you to avoid using would be things like, I want my audience to know, or I want my audience to believe. Okay, let's think about that. How do I know that my audience can list those potential career paths? Well, if they can list them, then I know that they know. The same thing is true of someone who can believe something. I want them to believe that pursuing a degree in communication is a wise choice. Well, how do I know that they believe it? They can explain to me why it would be a good choice for them. So I want you to use some action verbs in your specific speech goal. And the specific speech goal is simply giving you direction for your presentation. After you write the specific speech goal, the next thing that you want to do is take that statement and transform it into a sentence that you can actually use to communicate the central idea to your audience. I call this a thesis statement. So your thesis statement should be a direct statement that uses very specific language and really does cast a vision and tell the audience where we're going in our presentation. Take a look at these examples with me for a moment. I might say that communication majors can find jobs. Is that a good thesis? Well, it's not very specific. It's really broad and general. And to be honest, it sounds a little bit bland. Take a look at the second one. Communication majors can find jobs in many organizations. That one might be a little bit better, but again, it's very broad, it's very general. We're not being specific and really telling the audience what we're going to talk about in this specific speech. Let's take a look at the last one. Communication majors can find jobs in education and also corporate training. That one definitely gets a little more specific and tells the audience what we're going to be talking about in this speech. The audience from this statement actually knows that we're going to talk about jobs in education and corporate training. That's the kind of thesis statement that you want to put together. When you're putting your thesis statement together, there's a couple of things that I want you to avoid, okay? So a thesis statement is, first of all, not a question. You are the speaker and you are taking a stand on an issue. So you want to tell us what your answer is to a question. Can communication majors find jobs? You tell me, you're the speaker. Okay? It's also not an incomplete sentence. So on your speech outline, I want you to actually see the sentence that you will use when you communicate your thesis to your audience. This is important. Also, you want to keep it nice and concise, so you don't want it to be too wordy. My encouragement would be it shouldn't be more than two sentences long. You could probably take a statement and pare it down so it's nice and neat, and this is good for your listener. Remember that for someone who's a reader, if they don't understand a sentence, they can go back and reread it as many times as they need. But for a listener, you've got one shot to make sure that they clearly understand where you're going in your presentation. So be concise. Now that we have some excellent thesis statements prepared to communicate to our audience that direct statement about what this speech is about, now it's time to think about some of the smaller topics or the main points that you will use to support that thesis statement. So for instance, if my thesis statement reads, "The benefits of majoring in communication outweigh the costs," what could my potential main points be? From that sentence, I see two main points. I'm going to talk about the benefits, and then I'll talk about the costs secondly. Or another example might be this. If I want to say that communication majors can find jobs in corporate training offices as an organizational consultant and in higher education, now I've got three main points, and I'm going to cover those three main career fields in hopes that my audience understands if they choose communication, you could find jobs in all three of these areas. As a good speaker, you probably want to have between 2 to 5 main points in your speech. Any more than 5 is going to be too much for the audience to really digest and remember. So keep it simple and choose 2 to 5 main topics that you want to cover in your speech that really help support that thesis statement and show your audience that it's true. Lastly, after you've got your thesis statement prepared and you've thought about the main points you want to discuss, you want to write a sentence that will come at the very end of your introduction that previews for your audience specifically where we're going to go in this speech. I call this the preview of main points, and it really is just that. It's telling them the main points that you'll cover in the presentation. You will actually say your thesis and your preview of main points at the very end of the introduction. You could either combine them together or you can make them separate into 2 sentences. So for instance, I could say, studying communication will increase your communication competence professionally and personally. How many main points do I have? Well, I have 2. I'm going to talk about how it increases competence professionally and then personally. And I like that because it's nice and concise, but it does still preview for the audience where we're going. Or maybe you have a topic that's a little more complex. Maybe you'd like to separate out those 2 sentences. You might say communication majors are highly employable. Specifically, they can find jobs in higher education, corporate training, and human resources offices. Now the sentences are separate. You're taking a stand, they are highly employable, and hopefully you'll prove that to us. But you're also telling us, again, what those 3 main job areas are that you will cover. So, when you sit down to begin writing your speech, I want you to cast a vision. What do you want your audience to be able to say when you stop speaking? First, you're going to set some goals for yourself, a general goal and a specific goal of what you want your audience to be able to do after you're done. Then you're going to write it as a thesis statement, how you're going to communicate that central idea to your audience. And then you're going to think about your main points. How are you going to support that thesis? What categories will you need to cover? And write into your thesis statement a preview of main points that you communicate directly to your audience in your introduction. Good luck!